Customer service, done right, can be your company's single biggest competitive advantage. Welcome to the Customer Service Revolution. Join customer service authority and best-selling author John DeJulius as he interviews leaders who are revolutionizing their industries. This is more than a podcast, though. It's a movement. The Customer Service Revolution is a radical overthrow of conventional business mentality designed to transform what customers and employees experience. If you are a revolutionary customer service leader who's ready to stop competing on price and obsessed with building a brand that people cannot live without, this podcast is for you.
Need help getting brilliant at the basics? Contact Claudia at thedejuliusgroup.com and find out how the team of consultants at the DeJulius Group can help you get there.
Hello, revolutionaries, and welcome to episode 147 of the Customer Service Revolution podcast. I am John DeJulius, Chief Revolution Officer of the DeJulius Group. Today, my interview is with Scott Greenberg, author and speaker. For 10 years, Scott was a multi-unit, award-winning franchisee owner of Edible Arrangements. His operation won international recognition, best customer service out of more than 1,000 locations worldwide. Going beyond numbers and profits, Scott delves into the human side of business to help organizations boost performance and make memorable impact on the lives of customers and employees. He is also the author of the new book, Stop the Shift Show. Stop the Shift Show. Turn your struggling hourly workers into a top-performing team. All right, before we get into our interview, let's talk about what's happening in CX news. American Airlines laying off 600-plus workers to improve customer service. I guess American Airlines believes less is better when it comes to customer service. American Airlines announced that it would be laying off employees to provide new, elevated service to customers, USA Today reported. Today, we are announcing updates to our contact center organization that will help us better serve our customers. As part of these updates, we are creating a new customer success team that will be dedicated to providing more convenient, elevated support to American Airlines customer with some of their most complex travel needs, the airline said in a statement. The layoffs are primarily all in the airline's customer service related positions, such as workers that assist passengers with their lost luggage and AA Advantage loyalty program service groups. In hopes to combat this, American will be creating a vision called Customer Success Team. They will hire 135 workers for that new team aimed at improving their customer experience. I don't know. What do you think? Laying off over 600 customer-facing employees to hire 135. I hope it works out for them. I hope it works out for their passengers. All right. In other related news in the airlines, United flight attendants are no longer allowed to be on their cell phones. United Airlines want their flight attendants to be more engaged with passengers, more aware, more attentive. Love this. Love this. To help them focus more on passengers, the use of personal cell phones is prohibited for flight attendants. A recent United Airlines company memo contained reminders to cabin crew that they are required to be seen as attentive to their passengers. The memo stated, use of personal electronic devices and or accessories is not permitted while customers are on board the aircraft. Customers look to flight attendants for great service. How comfortable would you be asking someone for help if they were engrossed in their cell phone? What impressions would that give you? Even in public, you should always remain approachable in uniform and display courtesy to customers and other employees, said the memo. All right, we will be right back with our interview.
Are you curious how your company's customer experience ranks against world-class companies? Take our complimentary Company Service Aptitude Test and find out. Visit thedejuliusgroup.com/CSAT to take the test and find out your company's strongest and weakest areas. That's thedejuliusgroup.com/CSAT.
Welcome back, revolutionaries. And now for our interview with Scott Greenberg, author of Stop the Shift Show, Turning Your Struggling Hourly Workers into a Top Performing Team. Welcome, Scott.
So glad to be here.
So glad to have you. And where does this podcast find you today?
Los Angeles, California. I'm here at home today.
All right. Well, great. So you were an employer and experienced your own shift show. Talk about that for us.
Yeah. So for more than 10 years, I was a multi-unit owner with edible arrangements. So I had, multiple storefronts in Los Angeles. By the time I opened those, I had already been doing professional motivational speaking for 13, 14 years. And I thought I would have an edge over managing employees because I knew golden nuggets like there's no I in team. I really kind of underestimated what it takes in the real world, especially with hourly employees, to hire, to retain, to bring out their best. And so it was a rude awakening. So for me, it wasn't just about, the retail businesses, but now it was like my credibility as a speaker on the line. So I set out to crack the code. I used the business as much to learn as much to
like
earn.
A laboratory, right?
Precisely. It was great. And because as you know, there's a lot of people who are, on stage, but not in the real world actually doing it. And so for me, it's important to get that experience. But we cracked the code and we figured it out, and it really made all the difference in the world.
Okay. And so what were some of your struggles? And I'm sure a lot of listeners, leaders, entrepreneurs have. I remember when I opened my first business, 31 years ago, we were really good at customer experience, primarily because 50% of the staff was me and my wife. So whether you got it or you didn't get it, you had to get it because you had to work next to us. But as we grew, as we started opening multiple locations and we weren't everywhere, our customer experience went backwards, just for that reason. And so what were some of your experiences?
Well, from the very beginning, I knew that customer experience was everything. I put a lot into that, especially because I knew so little about marketing.
Yeah.
I figured the way I'm going to drive traffic to our business is by bringing traffic back to the business and turning my customers into spokespersons. So I know this is something you talk about extensively, and I'm sure people who are watching or listening to this, they sort of get that. That was a big deal for me to be able to do that. But I also didn't want, like yourself, I didn't want to have to personally be in the business because I wanted to be out also giving presentations and things. And so I really needed my employees to become great advocates for the business and provide an extraordinary experience. So I thought that just explaining that to them and inspiring them would do it. But for those first couple of years, I struggled even to get them to show up, to stay, to demonstrate any kind of level of caring. And I realized it was going to take a lot more than just cliches, that I was going to have to do a better job with culture, a better job with understanding what they need, what they want, to stop making assumptions about what's going to make them happy and ask more questions. Not totally unlike we need to do for customers. We can't be making assumptions about what the customer wants. We can't impose our values on them. We have to ask. We have to pay attention. So when I started treating my employees like my customers, everything changed. So that was a big deal.
Yeah. And as you knew and found out, and I found out sometimes the hard way, is what is happening, what's being experienced on the inside is what's going to get experienced on the outside, right?
Yeah, well, you think of, what is a brand? A brand is how a company feels to the outside world. Culture is how a company feels within for employees. And there's a direct correlation. When there's a better culture, it correlates with a better brand. So, I learned that firsthand, first the hard way. But then once we figured it out, when I improved the employee experience, the customer experience got better, as did online reviews, as did sales.
So tell us why you wrote the book, Stop the Shift Show, and what that title means.
Well, I talk to a lot of business owners in the work that I do as a speaker. Before every presentation, I connect with audience members. I do my due diligence to research who's going to be there listening. And I hear the complaints. And I wrote one book for the franchise industry called The Wealthy Franchisee. It's all about the mindset and practices of top franchise business owners. And I talk a little bit about that book, about managing employees. But what I found once the book was out there, that the presentations that people were requesting as a result of that book and the questions they were asking, most of them were around what they call dealing with employees.
Mm-hmm.
So I saw that there was an opportunity there. But I'll tell you what really inspired it. It was an insult I got. I wrote an article for Nation's Restaurant News, and it was all about improving the customer experience in quick service restaurants, fast food, by training employees to pay attention to the emotional state of the guest who's right in front of you. Are they quiet? Are they being social? Are they playful? Are they in a hurry? See if you can get a sense of it and then match that and accommodate it. So part of it was to improve the customer experience, but part of it was also to break the employees out of, robotic customer service, next in line, like to get them to be more present. It's a pretty innocuous article. And I didn't think it was even especially innovative, but a decent message. Well, the next day, I get this scathing message from a guy who thought it was ridiculous. Said, have you ever had experience managing employees or running a business? I can barely get my people to show up, let alone become art. So basically, his thought was because he wasn't able to get better performance out of employees, it's not possible. So first I was upset reading this because it was directed criticism at me. But then I took a step back and found some grace for this guy. And I thought, he must really be struggling if he's so triggered by this innocuous article. And I bet there's a lot of people out there who, at a very deep level, really struggle with their employees. And I wonder if I could be of help here. Mm-hmm. And so that's made me think, I'm going to really look into this more, reflect my own experiences and do some research. And I want to write a book about how to crack the code with this group, hourly workers, how they're different from those on salary, what do they need, and how can managers meet those needs to improve performance. And I found a lot of places, they're in the minority, but a lot of business environments in a variety of industries that are killing it with hourly workers. So this book is about what they're doing and what anyone can do to improve their experience, which enhances the guest experience and ultimately grows businesses.
Yeah, I mean, listen, this, at the end of the day, while if you have this type of business, we'd love for these employees to, come work for us, stay for 30 years. But most shift positions, cashier at, a fast food restaurant, quick service restaurant, but those are temporary transitional jobs. They're first jobs. So whether they're going to be there 6 months, 3 years, or they grow and become shift manager, the general manager someday, but that's got to be such a small single digit percentage. They can still provide incredible value while they're there. And we don't just have to accept that we're only going to have them for 6 to 12 months. And I love your point of dealing with employees. What a horrible mentality that is. And they're going to feel like they're being dealt with, right?
Yeah. One thing that I hear employers complaining about is young people's sense of entitlement. I also think that entitlement is horrible. But that includes entitlement on behalf of the employer. I meet a lot of managers and business owners who just want to offer a salary, hire the people, go through perfunctory training, put them out to work, don't want to get to know them, don't want to understand their needs. They just want them to work. And then when they don't show, incredible promise, when they're not absolutely incredible and incredibly loyal, the employer starts saying kids these days and complains about them. Who's entitled there?
Right.
Younger generations aren't going to be loyal and respectful just because of your job position as an employer. Not anymore. Loyalty and respect has to be earned. And a lot of people don't want to have to do what it takes to earn that loyalty and respect. They don't want to be great managers. So they think with whatever they're doing is good enough, but they expect great performance. And I find that unacceptable. Look, not that there aren't issues with hourly workers and young workers. Again, I did it for 10 years. I get it. And I look at the world through my Generation X perspective, and I look at some of the norms of Generation Z, and it boggles my mind. I don't think it's okay to ghost an employer, to flake in a job interview. But what I learned is when I can stop being judgmental about them and instead be more curious, well, now I'm in a better mental state to really understand them, to figure out how they tick, so I can adapt my management style to bring out the best in them. And that's what all these great managers and employers are doing. They're putting their own judgment aside, just getting to know them the same way you want to get to know the customer, right? You do market research to get to know the customer. You don't judge the customer. You just accommodate them. This is what we have to do with hourly workers as well.
Well, and the Chick-fil-A's of the world and the Ritz-Carltons of the world, they're going after the same labor pool as their competitors. They're not paying more yet.
Nope.
The results they're getting, the 19-year-old to 22-year-old are doing it differently. But I also believe and know that the 19-year-old to 22-year-olds that's crushing it for Chick-fil-A or Ritz-Carlton 6 months earlier could have been working at a different brand, showing up just before check-in time, not as bought in. So it's not necessarily, the hiring's important, but it's what they do with what we do with them and getting them be part of that vision. And it's funny, I do talk about like you do, how we all complain about this generation. And there's so many things wrong with it. Number one, I had some quotes about, I listed, all the generations, boomers, X, all the way down. Actually, who are these quotes talking about? This next generation, we're screwed, blah, blah, blah. And everyone said that's either millennials or Y. These quotes from like 1960s. And, every previous generation has predicted the demise of the next one.
I have a quote, John, from Aristotle.
Right. What do you say?
Explained in 4th century BC. He said the same in his own dramatic words, the same thing is basically kids these days. And I joke that his parents must have complained about him. Like, what's with this kid? All he does is sit around and think. Like, and I'm sure people have always complained about the generations after them when the generations haven't been worse. They've just been different.
Yes.
And millennials were the generation that grew up in the internet age. So there's been more of an opportunity to complain about them than anyone. But look what's happened with millennials. They're doing just fine. They're earning incomes, buying homes, running companies, governing countries. They're doing just fine. And our world couldn't survive without them because us older generations, Xers and boomers, we haven't had to get them to fit in our world. We have to adapt to live in the world that now is run by millennials. The same thing is going to happen with Generation Z.
Yeah. And so let me, this is kind of my evolution I went through. Back to, it's so funny that X generation boomers, we're the ones that are complaining about these new generations, but we're also the ones that raised them. Like, so we got to be looking in the mirror and saying, all right, that's us. But here's my evolution and see, what you agree with and where you may think I have it wrong. A few years ago, the word hustle got canceled, right? And I was like, what? And, I kind of got annoyed because that's everything I've done. That's everything, to get where I've gotten. That's everything that I've taught my 3 boys. It's like, what do you mean? But I wanted to be open-minded. I didn't want to be the old man getting off my lawn, all that. So I investigated, I researched, I read, I interviewed, the younger. And here's what I got. They had a front row seat to watch their parents work to live. And I guess there's 2 types. For one part, it maybe never paid off financially. They worked 60 hours a week, maybe 2 jobs, long past retirement age, maybe till they died. Then there's the other one that financially it paid off their parents, but that comes at a cost too. And usually the cost is family, marriages. And, when I see it from their vantage point, who's to say they're wrong, right? Who's to say that they want that? And that we, or our generations, are right. So it did open up a perspective to see what they're thinking about. What do you think? What's your thoughts?
Us older generations, we take such pride in how much we've suffered,
right?
And what we've been
we went to school uphill both ways,
right? And we were loyal to these a-hole employers who, I'm going to motivate you with a baseball bat over the head. Oh, thank you, sir. Can I have another? Like,
right.
We always brag about what we're willing to endure and what we're willing to sacrifice. And you're right. Younger generations have watched us with our heart attacks, with our life imbalance. They've seen a lot of things thinking there's not enough money in the world or a house big enough in the world to make me want to live that life. And so when you look at the studies of like Generation Z, one of their biggest values is life balance. And along with that, with, mental health and that kind of thing. And they don't just want to make money or just have status or just follow this path. They want to live this balanced life. And when I think about for my kids, that's kind of what I want for them.
Yeah.
And if the result of Generation Z taking over the world is that they're going to advocate for life balance, is that so bad? Do we need to be as rich or as productive as we think we need compared to, you look at a profit and loss statement, the top part is the revenue, the bottom half is the cost of that revenue, the expenses. But what you never see in the bottom half is how many Little League games you missed out on.
Right.
How many fights you got in with your wife because your husband, because you're so stressed out from business. There's a lot of cost to that revenue, to our success, that we don't talk about.
100%. 100%.
But younger generations do. And so what that means is they're not going to be driven by the same motives. So what's most important to us as the older folks is money or status. If that's what we dangle, if that's what we use to motivate younger generations, it's not going to work because it's not what matters most to them. So what we need to do is let go of our own biases, our own values, look at theirs, and then say, how can I change my work environment for my employees to give them what it is that they want, so they'll come, so they'll stay, and so they'll operate at a higher level.
Yeah, and that's what I truly believe, and I know that's what your book is about. Is what motivated us isn't what motivates them. And you even go to the billionaires, right? Who wants to be a billionaire? The first three off the top of my head: Elon Musk, Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, and I'm sure, obviously there's a ton more. All divorced, and not judging them, but that type of success comes at a price. So we got a lot of leaders, a lot of top leaders listening to this. Let's talk about how can, as leaders, I don't know if you saw this article, it was really interesting, came out a couple of weeks ago about, 80% of managers today are accidental managers. I don't know if you saw that, really interesting, meaning, Scott, you might be the best in your department and I promote you, but I don't train you. And so here's a couple of things. A, were you leadership material or were you just great at sales, whatever? Second thing is, if you had the potential to be a great leader, I didn't set you up to be a great leader because I just threw you in there. And now people you used to hang around and go have beers with on Friday, you're now supposed to, lead them and manage them and hold them accountable. So a couple questions here for our executives listening. How can they develop leaders better? And how can they make their leaders more accountable to inspire their workforce to want to come to work, to whether, again, it's going to be 6 months or 6 years, make me want to show up and work hard?
The statistic that I found in researching my book was that the average person who becomes a manager goes 10 years before they get any formal management of people training. They might be trained on how to run payroll, that kind of business. They might be trained on the systems that are required there. But as far as how to engage, how to inspire, how to resolve conflict, how to build culture, most people never get any of that. But how critical is that, right? It's like they're hired because they show job competence and maybe a good attitude, which is great. But managing people is an entirely different skill set. It's like taking someone who's a great brain surgeon and saying, you know what, you are so awesome. I'm going to hire you now to be a rocket scientist.
Right.
But they're different things. Management of people doing a job is completely different than doing the job. And so if the right kind of training isn't there for bringing out the best in people, you're not going to bring out the best in people. And you might even be taking this really competent person and now making them a mediocre manager because maybe they didn't want it, or maybe this wonderful skill set they had here isn't necessarily the same as the skill set that they now have responsibility for. And so I think that there needs to be a higher level of commitment to management training, to developing managers, and at two different levels. There was a study done of 100,000 managers, and they were ranked. And when they looked at that group of managers who were described as very results-oriented, but not people-oriented, only 9% of that group ranked among the top 10% of all managers. Well, then they looked at managers who were less results-oriented, but really people-oriented, culture and, happiness and employee engagement. Of that group, only 8% less made it into the top 10%. When they looked at managers who employees described as both results-oriented and people-oriented, 82% of that group made it into the top 10%. So managers have to be able to manage on both fronts. The problem is, in their own brain, it involves using different regions. To be results-oriented, it's the prefrontal cortex. To be people-oriented, it's more the middle brain. And there's sort of a neurological seesaw. When you're engaging one part of the brain, you're kind of not engaging the other. So they have to be deliberate about doing both, but most can't because they're just so busy. I think busyness is the enemy of leadership. So to be a great manager, you really have to do both, which means you need training in both. Most aren't getting that.
If you enjoy what you're learning on the Customer Service Revolution podcast, you'll love our weekly newsletter, The E-Service. It's full of great customer experience tips and stories, includes special offers, webinars, and more each week. To sign up, head to tdg.click/e-service. That's tdg.click/e-service, ESERVICE. Enter your preferred email address, and you can look forward to great advice from John in your inbox every Wednesday.
So in your book and from your experience research, do you have examples of companies that do a great job? And specifically, what do they do in leadership development and training?
So for me, it was very important to show a variety of work environments that use hourly workers. Fast food, retail, manufacturing, senior in-home care. I really tried to show a variety of industries and sectors.
B2B, B2C, yep.
All that kind of stuff, yes. To really see what they all have in common. And they all have different individual tactics, ways of accomplishing this one big thing, which is really the secret to it all. And that secret is focusing on the human side of the business, of developing employees and of really meeting what I call their soft needs. And I'll give some examples in a little bit, but let me define my terms. We're all familiar with hard skills and soft skills. But employees also have what I call hard needs and soft needs, as do customers. In fact, with customers, they'll come to a business to meet a hard need. They need a widget. They need a cheeseburger. They need someone to mow their lawn, right? That's what they're asking for. But there's also a soft need in that transaction, an emotional need, a way they want to be treated, a way they want to feel. And you think about, customer service, right? What the customer gets matters less than how the customer feels. The feeling we give them will determine what they say about us and if they come back. Well, the exact same thing is true with employees. They have their hard needs, which is usually, their forms of compensation. But what really drives performance or determines if they stay or not is if their soft needs are being met. And there's general soft, and that's their psychological, emotional needs. Things like respect and recognition, feeling like they're doing meaningful work, that they're growing, that they're part of something and part of a group. But every generation also has its own soft needs that might differ from others. So what I noticed is that all these work environments, through different tactics and means, they meet employees' soft needs at a higher level than everyone else. That's why they recruit better. That's why they retain better. And that's why they see better performance across the board. Now, one of them has said, well, we recruit better, that we have a high performance workforce because we pay the most. In fact, none of them pay the most, right? But they provide the best employee experience, and that's why they thrive. So I'll give you some examples of some of the tactics. I interviewed a restaurant owner from KFC. He owns 128 restaurants. So think of the exposure that he has to, lower skilled, lower paid hourly workers, especially younger workers. But he told me that even though it's a fast food restaurant, he has a great lifestyle and he attributes it all to his employees. So he does all kinds of little things. So with recruiting, at the end of the pandemic, when everyone was inviting employees back, he did some market research to see how much people are getting paid, and he offered $1 an hour more. Now, this wasn't a long-term plan. It was a short-term plan just to get employees because he knew that's what would get them. But he said getting them means nothing if I can't keep them. So he really puts a lot of focus on culture in a number of small ways. They do lots of recognition within the company, and they have different levels of managers, all of whom create their own awards, and then they give people within the company the awards. But one tiny thing, it's easy to do, is onboarding employees, not just training them, but onboarding them in the culture. So the first day of work, the employee spends the entire day with the manager who gets to know them, shows them around, introduces them to employees, just builds rapport and builds a relationship so they feel safe and they feel connected. One of the questions they ask in casual conversation, hey, what's your favorite candy? Sounds like casual conversation, but the manager makes note of it because 3 weeks later, when that employee is doing a good job, they might give them that kind of candy. And the employee appreciates it because the manager remembered it. And that means more to them than a $50 Starbucks card or a $100 bill. It's the thoughtfulness. It's sort of a customized incentive, a small little thing that makes a world of difference. Another work environment, senior in-home care. This is an industry
You're
that
talking
has
about
been,
tough industries here.
right. Well,
to
in this
work in.
industry, they long before the pandemic, they have always struggled to find enough caregivers. It's easy to find clients. There's lots of elderly people who need in-home help. Finding caregivers is a struggle. Well, what this person does, unlike anybody else in the industry, and I've worked with a lot of senior in-home care groups that have bring me in to speak to their systems. When an employee is coming in or a potential employee is coming in for a job interview, he reserves a parking space right up front with a sign that says, "Welcome, John." I mean, not John, that's your name. But if you're applying, it would say, "Welcome, John." This parking space right up front. Then when you went inside, whether you had a car or not, there's a big digital readout that again says, "Welcome, John." Then you're brought inside, and the first thing they offer you a hot beverage, coffee or tea. And he's done A/B tests, and he says that those who are offered a hot beverage are statistically more likely to accept the job if offered compared to those who don't. So he's wooing these people. So when they come in, they've probably been interviewing other places, but only one is reserving a parking space, having these welcome signs, offering them a drink. The message from the very beginning is
And these are for candidates who are interviewing.
for candidates, not even for employees, just for candidates. So from the very beginning, it says, we're different, that we see you and we care about you. And that's how it always is. So he's not offering a ton of money, right? But it's a lot of these small little thoughtful things. Another work environment, one person I met, she owns 3 facilities. It's a franchise called the Exercise Coach. So people go in for personal training. Most of the employees are college students who have to work at 100 hours of training before they're certified to coach. So this owner is investing a lot of money, onboarding these people and getting them up to speed. Well, what she determined is that what they really value is personal growth. Again, they're being college students. So she treats the job like it's a paid internship. So there's a lot of education that she does. There's an optional book club where she'll provide the book and they can all read the book and talk about it together. So they're not just doing the work, they're learning about work. They're learning about the industry, learning about business so they can apply it because she determined that's what her employees want. So, and with Generation Z, they're known for being very entrepreneurial. A lot of them don't want jobs. They want to have their own businesses. So for employers, that's an opportunity to treat the job as a paid internship where, hey, by doing this work, I'm going to have conversations with you so you can see how it connects to the kind of work, the kind of business you want to be in the future. And they will love that.
I love that. Those are brilliant. Go ahead.
Well, so I was going to say, so what's the alternative to doing these things? Hire people, pay them, train them, put them to work, and then every now and then buy them pizza and tell yourself you're a good boss.
Well, listen, even that I think is a stretch. There's not a lot of training, that people get. It's, I needed you 3 weeks ago, 3 months ago. I finally got you, and just answer the phone. Just check people and check. I'll teach you the basics to get you up and going, and then I'll teach you the rest next week. And next week never comes.
Or, I did a presentation for a conference. It's the Lawn Care 100, the top lawn care companies in the country. These are big, like some of them publicly traded companies. It's not like some guy with a pickup truck, big companies. So I shared with them this employee coaching model that I co-created with someone. It's all about diagnosing employees for a specific task, looking at their hard skills and soft skills separately. And then based on your diagnosis, we have this color model that shows them how to coach that employee for that task to boost and maintain their performance. So I went through all this. And so one of these CEOs, he raises his hand and he says, so what you're telling me is for hiring that I need to lower my standards? I said, well, I don't know. What are your standards? And he basically said he wants to hire people who just are great and they have a good attitude and they know how to do the job. He just wants to put them right to work. I said, well, good luck. If you can find that person, go for it. But for most people, they're going to need help getting from point A to point B. The training, the onboarding, the coaching, that's what management is. And it's an investment of time. But if you make that investment up front, it will save you time because you're not going to spend as much time having to continue to hire and recruit. You're not going to spend as much time fixing people's bad habits and fixing their mistakes. So it's an investment that we have to make to set people up for success And the return on that investment is going to be an employee who operates at a much higher level. And if it is something like a quick service restaurant, or maybe they're just looking to save money for prom, right? Maybe you can turn what you expect to be 3 months into 6 months, right? It's whatever we can do to move the needle to improve retention and get better performance.
I just spoke, and I do this all the time. I'll speak to, and it could be the hospitality industry, or last week I was speaking to a manufacturer, so totally opposite leaders. And I said, let me ask you something, let's say there was 30 leaders in there. I said, how many people joined the HVAC industry or this company, which is one and the same, Famous Supply, 10, 20, 30 years ago, thinking it was a temporary transitional job, and you're still here today? And I almost had to count the hands that didn't go up. And that's when you know it's a great company, is because probably like maybe how your career started with edible arrangements is, but you get, it's kind of like The Godfather. You get sucked in and you're like, oh, this is more than I thought. I feel so maybe I'm gonna stay here through college. And then you finish school and you're like, there's opportunities. And I didn't know that I can go from a cashier or someone working on the assembly line to the boss, to the VP, to the this, that, whatever. And then something else you brought up, but a lot of things I really liked that unpacked. I want to just make sure we are speaking to Scott Greenberg, author of the new book, Stop the Shift Show, Turn Your Struggling Hourly Workers into a Top Performing Team. A couple other things I want to unpack. I open my presentations with a question. I say, if you're going to build a world-class customer experience company, and I don't care if that's, a hot dog stand, a pizza, whatever the business is, what is more important? A, the hiring of new employees, or B, the training and culture you bring them in on? I'm going to have you vote. I go, before you vote, I'm going to tell you the obvious answer is both. Right. I mean, absolutely. It's kind of like saying, if you want to be in the best shape of your life outside of 20, and younger, what's more important, your diet or the exercise? Both. I mean, you can't, at our age, you can't, eat, horribly. You're never going to outwork a bad diet. And, if only you eat well and you don't exercise, that's not going to be enough. Right. But
I don't know. I'm still trying.
Right. No, I know. I always make Ozempic. Yeah, that's the new trick. But so back to my audience question. I say, listen, so the answer is both. You got to do both. But I'm going to ask you, give me 1 extra percent, right? 51%. No wrong answers, I say, And so the audience votes. I say, how many people say A, the hiring? And you get a percentage. And then how many people say B, the training culture? And probably 60% or more say B, the culture. I say, I agree with you. I say, now, A's, don't get mad at me. I've written books, I've written chapters on the hiring and how important that is. But do we really think the Disneys, the Ritz-Carltons, the Chick-fil-A's of the world found 50,000 employees, kind of like your guy, who's looking for, born to serve? Oh, I mean, I don't think there's 500 human beings walking planet Earth born to serve. But like one of my favorite quotes Walt Disney said, we don't put our new people in Disney, we put Disney in our new people. And I really think that's what you're talking about, is getting people to realize this is more than a job. There's meaning and purpose, and there's opportunities. If I, work hard, I don't have to just be whatever I'm currently doing here. And then one last thing I want to unpack that you said, we call it a recruitment experience. And pre-pandemic, someone might have heard you or I were hiring, and they hope, I will get a job at that business. My first business we started 31 years ago, is a chain of upscale salons and spas in the Cleveland area. So using that as an example, right? You want to get a job there. So I think back in the day, people applied hoping that they'd get hired at this job, right? Their dream job. Well, as you know, today, since the pandemic, people are looking for the best deal, whatever that is to them, right? Highest paid, best hours, whatever that may be. And they also know that it's an employee market, right? So I'm pretty sure, and I want all my managers and people that do the interviewing to assume this. anyone that's interviewing with us is interviewing 5 other places. And it may or may not be in the same industry, right? It could be totally different industries. So that's where I say we have to be providing, besides filtering to, say young Scott, 22-year-old Scott, is he right fit for us? But we also have to make sure, and that's why I loved the examples you gave with the parking spots and the whole experience. The recruitment experience is, I want wherever young Scott goes next on his interview to pale in comparison to the interview experience we gave him. So I think, you gave great examples to that.
Thanks. And, one thing I wanted to address too is, it's great if people know that there's opportunities to growth in the organization, but sometimes they're not. I had my stores, and, there were some people I was able to promote to assistant manager or shift lead or manager, but there's only so many of those positions. And I wasn't looking to grow beyond what I had because this is the main thing that I do. And I felt like if I'm doing my job, they're going to outgrow their job, which means either that I'm going to have to create a position for them, and maybe there's one to fill, or I have to be okay with them moving elsewhere and take pride that I enabled that to happen. And so we have to have reasonable expectations. What we don't want is to undercoach someone where they're mediocre and then they're stuck. So part of having a great work environment is one that you don't have to rely on specific people. You create a culture that sustains itself no matter who's there, right? Like any business should not have to rely on specific people. They're going to come and they're going to go. And we need to train them in such a way that we're preparing them for something big. Our hope is that they'll stay with us longer, though, because they feel so connected to the culture and to the work environment. That's what we want.
No, I loved your paid internship mentality because, listen, not everyone's going to stay, as we know. And it's great to have rags to riches story of saying, meet Denise, who 25 years ago started in the same position that you're starting today. And today she's a part owner, right? And that could be you. Who knows? But I think it's also just as valuable to demonstrate that someone who worked here for 3 or 4 years, I found out that their dream was not to work here, was to, eventually go on and then, like you said, do their own or get a completely different industry. But as you and I, we know a lot of people. We have connections, and we're able to make that introduction, and then they become brand ambassadors because one of their best parts of their career was working for us and learning the incredible skill set that made them successful at the next place. And you want to talk about customers and employees that you'll get from that alumni is fantastic.
Yeah.
So, Scott, I want to wrap up with what's the top 3 things leaders can do to help their leaders, help their company create top performers, top performing teams. Now, you could take it one of 2 ways on this. You could talk about, developing leaders, right, to do that, or what leaders need to do with their employees to do. So what if we had to give a game plan besides get the book, Stop the Shift Show, which I'm providing a link to on Amazon in the show notes, what would be the top 3 things you would recommend?
So, and we talked about some of them. So first is provide better management training. That if it's 1 or 2 employees who are underperforming, okay, you've mishired a couple of people. But if this is a continuing issue, and if it's chronic, that's a reflection of management.
Yeah,
It's
me, not them.
Right. So provide or get better management training, not just on the systems, but also on the people. That would be
you're talking about, soft skills, soft needs, people skills, better listening. I'm asking, not telling. So to be more specific, what should they be developing their leaders on? Those things.
Yeah. So learn the characteristics of great managers, right? Empathy, discipline, those kinds of things, right?
Okay.
You should learn how to have influence. What is that influences people? What is it that motivates people? When should I use extrinsic motivators? When should I use intrinsic motivators? And also do research to find out what those things actually mean. But all the things related to people, how can you be more influential, more impactful on your people? So get and provide better management training. That's number 1. Number 2, spend more time focusing on the soft needs of the people you want to hire and the people you have hired. just like you would with your customers. Identify psychologically, what is the kind of experience that these employees want to have? What are their emotional needs? For, not just the universal ones, but for them as a generation. And for these individuals, what matters most to them? Is it personal growth? Is it job security? Is it psychological safety? Is it life balance? Figure out what those things are and then wrap their job experience around that. So every single day, they're feeling reinforcement for the things that matter. Number 3, take culture off the mountaintop and bring it to the floor. These big, over-the-top, ridiculous mission statements and value statements usually don't translate to somebody who's scooping ice cream or frozen yogurt or assembling widgets. So if you say our mission here at our business is we're changing the world, and this person's just scooping ice cream, there's going to be a disconnect there. They're not going to be inspired by that. As opposed to, hey, we create moments of joy. Well, that connects a little bit more.
That's actionable. That's something I can do right now in this 30-second interaction. If I could make you smile as a customer, I did that,
Right. And John, and I can hold you accountable to it. I can say, hey, that last customer, did you bring them a moment of joy or did you just hand them ice cream?
Right.
Did
Was
you
it a transaction or an interaction?
That's right. So there's that. But then along with that, we think of values, right? Every business has these values. But again, hourly workers, they tend to be younger, less experienced, often less educated. So when our culture is in this abstract place, it's not going to connect. So you can talk about integrity, but do they even know what integrity means? So instead of saying integrity for every one of your values, say integrity, but then break it down to a list of behaviors, do's and don'ts you expect from them that reflect integrity. So for integrity, you might say, we always tell the truth. We follow through on our commitments. We only speak kindly of each other and of our customers. Teach them the behaviors that reflect integrity. Again, that way they can understand it and you can hold them accountable and praise them when they do those things and reprimand them when they don't. So they understand that these are the things that I need to do to support the culture. It needs to be at that level for the culture to have any meaning. If it's too abstract, too over the top, they're going to roll their eyes. So again, I have a lot more than 3 things.
No, I know.
If that's the question you asked.
So let's
I'd
repeat those 3 just as a title. Train leaders, develop them, and not only on the tactical, but on the power, people, soft skills. Number 2, I think, bring culture down to something, or was that number 3? Help me.
That was number 3. Number 2 was focus more on the soft needs of your team members.
Okay.
And then number 3 is take culture off the mountaintop and bring it down to the floor.
Scott Greenberg. You can visit and find out more about Scott Greenberg at www.scottgreenberg.com. And you can follow Scott on LinkedIn, and we will have all these links in our show notes. Scott, I really appreciate, you taking the time out. Congratulations on your success as an entrepreneur, as an author, and an international speaker. Thanks for being part of the Customer Service Revolution podcast.
Really enjoyed it. Thanks.
We'll be right back after that. Let's wrap up this episode with my mantra, living an extraordinary life so countless others do. Never forget about the unsung heroes in our lives. Recognize everyone, regardless of their position or title. Ask for their input and opinions. You may be surprised by what you learn. When the CEO of the Charles Schwab Corporation, Walt Bettinger, who's one of my favorite CEOs, was asked the best lesson he learned in college, he answered that he wanted to graduate with a perfect 4.0 GPA, and it came down to his last final exam. As Bettinger put it, I had spent many hours studying and memorizing formulas to do calculations for the case studies. The teacher handed out the final exam. It was one piece of a blank paper. The professor said, I've taught you everything I can teach you about business in the last 10 weeks, but the most important question is this: what's the name of the lady who cleans the building? That test and lesson had a lasting impact on Bettinger. As he puts it, it was the only test I have ever failed, and I got the B I deserved. Her name was Dottie, and I didn't know Dottie. Although he had seen her many times, he had never had a conversation with her, even if just to introduce himself and learn her name. Bettinger says, I've tried to know every Dottie I've worked with ever since. It was a great reminder of what really matters in life and that you should never lose sight of people who do the real work behind the scenes. Thank you, revolutionaries. We will see you on next week's podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Customer Service Revolution podcast with John DeJulius. Did you enjoy this episode? Consider leaving us a review. We value your feedback and love to hear how you're using the podcast in your organization. To hear more, be sure to subscribe now on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for being part of the Customer Service Revolution.